Hi folks, I'm Pastor Steve Herring, Stated Supply Pastor at the Pine Tops Presbyterian Church, Cobb Memorial Presbyterian Church, and Nahala Presbyterian Church. And it is Wednesday, the 18th of November, and it's time for us to do a little bit of Bible study. And we're going to stay with the format we started last week to put these in short sections and not have them be too long. So that way you have time to watch it without having to devote a whole hour of your life to the process. So we're going to try to make these into shorter little pieces. This week we are looking at what would seem to be a very simple question, and that question is, what does it mean that something is true or false? Truth versus falsehood. And we're discussing this because there are a number of questions and issues and problems of various sorts all around our country where people don't even agree on what the truth is. They see and feel and live different versions of truth. And when you look internationally, you look around the world, and travel perhaps to other countries, then you find that it's even more pronounced that people in different places live different versions of truth. And this is really confusing because how in the world can that happen? So, we're going to be working with that question. Now, I have an essay which I will hold up for you, and this essay is called What is Truth? And I wrote it back in 2011. So you see, that's 9 years ago, and we've been dealing with this problem in various forms for quite a while, as to people disagreeing about what's the truth and what's true and how that works. So I took this as a biblical, scriptural, religious explanation about how it is that we encounter truth. Okay, so the first thing, now if you email me, I can easily email you a copy of this thing.
We'll put it in the description.
We'll just put a link to it in the description, and then you can just click on the link, and then you can read this essay. Now, I wrote the essay when I was teaching comparative religion. I was teaching comparative religion at the community college, and students, when they study comparative religion, often get kind of a little concerned because they have been taught growing up that their particular variety of religion, their faith, is the truth, and all other faiths are falsehood. That's been just the way, in a very simple fashion, that a lot of churches function, and so it's natural that a lot of young people who've grown up in any church, that they would look at their particular variety of faith as the truth, and they would look at all other varieties of faith as falsehood. That's normal. So in order to try to help with that, I wrote this essay, What is Truth? But we'll begin with the question of scientific truth. Okay, now arithmetic is the best place to illustrate objective scientific truth. Mathematics. Take 2 oranges, add 2 more oranges, and you have 4 oranges, right? 2 oranges plus 2 oranges gives you 4, okay? And that is a fairly solid, demonstrable, pretty much inarguable. Finances work that way, prices of things work that way. You know, you pay for this and you get a certain, you give this many dollars and you get this much change. It's all pretty much solid. The world that way works pretty well. Now, scientific truth is something that, unfortunately, a lot of ordinary folks who are not particularly well trained in science tend to have a hard time with certain aspects of scientific proof. And the way that you need to understand science is that science is the way that the whole material world works. Everything that's made up of matter follows the scientific principles that govern matter. All of the rules of how things work are described in various disciplines of science, and in most aspects there is really no discussion. It's just taken as common reality. So, for instance, you have to put gas in your car. And if you choose that you don't want to put gas in your car, you don't believe that you need to put gas in your car, but you drive your car anyway, eventually your car will run out of gas and it will stop. And if it does that, what's the solution? What's the solution to that problem? Let's see, how about put gas in the car, right? And that really is the only way that it's going to work. And it doesn't matter what you think about that or how you feel about that. No gas, motor doesn't run. Very simple, okay? And this is generally the way the material world operates. Now, you might say, well, that's got nothing to do with science, but it actually does. It has everything to do with science, because science is how do we make gasoline? We make gasoline according to scientific principles, chemical principles, the way that the gasoline goes through the carburetor of the automobile, it goes from the fuel tank through the fuel line to the ignition system, where it is introduced into a cylinder and then it ignites, and when it mixes with oxygen and a little spark, it explodes, and that explosion is controlled in the piston of the motor, and the motor works. Everything about how it's made, how it's machined, the specifications, how it's put together, everything about how it works is really governed by scientific principles. Everything. Okay. Now, the difficulty comes in when people want to hear about some other way of looking at things, some other explanation for how things work, and it's usually on a very particular topic. And it could be, just to give you several examples, nutrition is one area, vaccines, that's an area, climate studies, atmospheric studies on climate change, that's an area, strategies for managing COVID-19, that's an area. There's just a bunch of different places where the scientific approach to a given problem can be construed or seen as inconvenient, undesirable, not what we want. And so various alternative explanations for things will develop. Alternative explanations that are wrong, but they are popular. And as they become popular and as they are shared on social media, people will begin to accept them because they hear them, they see them, they just take it as a given, and then you get these popular misconceptions. And there's a bunch of them. We had one going on back in the, if I could turn the clock back to the 1970s, I could tell you that there'd be two areas that I personally remember that where there was just a tremendous amount of discussion about what the truth was and what it was not. One was smoking is bad for you. Believe it or not, say 1971, 72, there was a great deal of discussion about whether or not smoking was bad for you. Well, we now fully and completely accept that, in fact, it's bad for you. Smoking is something that can kill you. It's terribly unhealthy, and that's commonly accepted. Well, back at a certain time when not smoking might be something people didn't want to even think about, there was a great deal of discussion as to the accuracy of those scientific findings. Another area that's very interesting to me that I can remember a whole lot of conversations about was seat belts, and whether or not seatbelt wearing should be required when you drive your automobile, or whether it should be optional to wear your seatbelt. And the decision is just based on the measurement of what the chances are that you're going to get killed when you have an automobile accident or injured in an automobile accident versus what keeps you safe in that accident. And the statistics basically prove that seatbelt wearing works. Now, I remember someone said to me when we were having this discussion in 1974, they said, well, my cousin wrecked his car and he was thrown out, and if he'd been wearing a seatbelt, he would have died. Anecdotal information. Okay, well, again, the basic idea is demonstratable, provable, measurable. Seatbelts work to save lives. Cigarettes are bad for you. Now, those are two from the past. We have others, and society will be such that these questions will always roll around to us. So that basically, this first section concludes just with the essential point that any properly done scientific data is what it is. It shows what it shows. It tells us what it tells us. And all of these principles work together to afford us all of the technologies, all of the conveniences, all of the inventions of the modern scientific, technical world. And if we want to live in that world, we need to accept that that's the way the physical world goes together. So that's a conclusion for part 1 of this little series on the question, what is truth? We'll pick up with a scriptural version of that in part 2.